Have you ever asked yourself a question that changed everything? A couple of years ago, I asked myself, what is the story of my 20s? If my future daughter sat me down, like I've done to my own mom, and said, Mom, tell me what your 20s were like. What did you do? What did you get up to? What would I tell her? When I thought about it, I was really disheartened and shocked, kind of a little bit scared to find out that I didn't really have a story to tell. Hi, I'm Awosa, food lover and ambitious home cook. Usually, in this part of the intro, I would go into how I spent the last 4 years learning to become a better home cook. But in this video, I want to talk about what led to that and what led me to realizing there was an issue and making a commitment to live my passions and to live an intentional full life. This isn't necessarily a video about how to be more productive or how to find your focus so you can make $1 million. I haven't made $1 million. This is a video about finding yourself. And really, I mean, finding your hobbies, finding the things that you enjoy again so that you can feel like, you have control over your life. If you've clicked on this title, then you'll know that I identified that the phones were an issue. But let's talk about what led to that moment. So we need to rewind a little bit. In the early days of social media, I will admit I was a little bit smug. Back then, and still kind of now, the whole thing was, oh, be careful what you look at on social media. The lives people are living aren't real, blah, blah, blah. And that's still true to an extent, but that was never really something that I had an issue with. I felt pretty smug because I was always pretty good at looking at the content online, taking what I needed from it and leaving the rest. And for the most part, I do like to see people living their best life on social media. It makes me feel kind of inspired. And even for the creators that I follow, I love to see their journey and their growth. So that wasn't really an issue for me. But I wasn't aware that there was a deeper, much bigger problem brewing. So at first, that question came about because once I've graduated college and I realized, okay, that's the last big set milestone for me, I really didn't know what was coming next. And what I mean by that is, you go to elementary school and then you go to middle school and then you go to high school or whatever way it works wherever you're from. And then you go to college. And for me and my family, college was a given. I always knew that I was going. I always knew that I was going to graduate. So for me, that was one of the normal stepping stones. Coupled with the fact that I'm working a pretty stressful job. And so I'm coming home and I just feel like I need to relax. I just need to let my brain rest. And what's the best way to rest? Mindless scrolling. Scrolling through, just laying in my bed, decompressing. And that's what I thought that I was doing. Until one day I realized that I've kind of outsourced all of the living that I'm supposed to be doing myself to people on an app that I don't even know. So if you're watching this video, there's a chance that you've felt that way before, and I would really appreciate it if you leave a like so that I know that I'm not spilling my guts for no reason. But I really do feel like how I was feeling and the things that I identified to fix that issue is something that could be helpful to other people. So that's why I'm sharing here today. This is not a video about trying to make you guys more money or this or that. I just feel really passionately about keeping ourselves moving forward and connected and living a normal life. And by normal, I mean pre-social media. How do we recreate that in a world that's not necessarily built for that anymore? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So back to the issues that I was having. At this point, I realized that social media has a way of keeping us so engaged because there's always something else to scroll for, always something else to like, always something else to do. It really does make you feel like you're doing something until you realize that you're not at all. Or at least for me, that's what it felt like. As a kid, I always had a variety of interests. I always say that my learning is hobby. I always say that my hobby is learning. And that looks like for me just intaking information. And in a way, I think that's part of the reason why I didn't realize that there was an issue with my social media consumption until it was too late, because my mind has always been stimulated by something. I've been a reader since I was a kid. I was reading cereal boxes. I was reading newspapers. I was reading anything that I could get my hands on at all times. So whenever they say, oh, social media always has you engaged and scrolling too much, that wasn't necessarily an issue for me because I've been doing that. I was just doing that with books before I was doing that with a phone. And so it was easy for me to tell myself that I was actually learning a lot online and I was intaking so much information and I was actually actually doing so well, but it's not the same thing at all. First of all, reading tweets is not the same as reading a book. It's just not. And then the way the information is structured and presented is not always in the best way to grow you as a person. What the main goal is for most of these companies is to just keep you on the app and to keep you scrolling no matter what. And it can feel pretty like disheartening, but remember to give yourself grace. These are multi-billion companies who are dedicated to keeping you on the app, and they're pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into that to make sure that you stay there. So we're up against a lot. And I just wanted to point that out because it's important to give yourself grace. But once you identify the problem, it doesn't just stop there. So in 2020, the restlessness that I was feeling came to a head. I found myself just feeling really strongly that I needed to be stimulated by something other than trending social media topics. I needed to give myself the chance to learn again. So the whole point here was basically, I need a hobby. And saying that out loud, it seems pretty dramatic to be making a video about needing to find a hobby, but I know that if I'm feeling this way, there's probably somebody else that felt the same way too. So I realized that I needed a hobby. And the first place for me to look was go back to childhood. What are the things that I really enjoyed doing? What were my interests? What are the things that really made me feel like I was alive as a child? What did I spend my time doing before I took all of that up with phones? And so that's the first piece of advice that I would give you. If you're looking to rediscover yourself again and looking to rediscover the interests that you have, I would go back to childhood. So before social media took up so much of our space, what were the things that sparked joy from you outside of your phone? For me, obviously, reading was a really big thing. I knew that I didn't have the attention span the way that I used to. And what I did with that was deciding, okay, I'm going to get back into the reading. And I used to read a variety of different genres and topics, but I knew that I needed to make it as easy as possible for myself. And so I decided to go back to reading romance. And the first piece of advice I would give you once you find that whole childhood topic is don't try and jump into the deep end. If you feel that you can, that's good. But if it's something that you need to ease yourself into, try and find the most enjoyable aspect of that hobby and turn it up to the max and really, really lean into that, because I think that trying to make something as easy as possible is the best way that you can, immerse yourself in something again. But aside from reading, OG Goes Gourmet, as I said before, was born out of a need to both reconnect and disconnect. The thing about cooking, or at least food for me, is I've always been a Food Network kid. I would sit in front of my TV watching Giada De Laurentiis and Emerald Lagasse go bam on the TV, and I would just soak all that information in. And I thank God that by virtue of having to eat to live, I couldn't really let go of the food as a hobby. So reading was something that I needed to rediscover, but I found that with food, I had actually kind of kept that one going. Because I needed to eat to live, it was easy to actually continue to discover new hobbies and to try them and all that stuff. So in 2020, when I'm feeling restless and I'm feeling like I really need to do something, food was one that I was like, okay, you've always been a Food Network baby. You would like to go to culinary school, but you're not going to because you're working a new job and that's just not the path that you're finding yourself on right now. What can you do? And I knew, okay, if I'm scrolling anyways and I'm doing all this stuff online, I know for a fact that there's resources and information out there that I can use to make myself better in the kitchen. So I decided that I was gonna pretty much train myself to become a chef at home. I wanted to hone into like the cooking and the food and use the resources that I'm learning online to feed that interest and bring it back to real life. Now, not only am I scrolling, I'm turning that scrolling into something tangible. I think that's really one of the main things that we need to recognize. Like, it's so easy to feel that social media has you learning and doing so much, but if you're not applying the content anywhere at all in real life, how useful is it really? And so that was one of the things that I really decided to do. I think content was supposed to feed our lives, not become our lives. And for a lot of people, me at the time as well, like it can really become your life and it's kind of scary. Now, another thing that's super important to point out is I knew that I needed to embrace being a beginner and to feel like I'm allowing myself to get better at something. I think a way that social media can put pressure on that in a way that we don't realize is we're often looking at people deep into their career, or people who are professionals or something, people who have already invested time into something, and they're showing us the fruits of that labor. But it can feel like, wow, my product doesn't look like that. Well, you're comparing yourself to an expert. Of course, it's not going to look like that. So I really knew that I needed to take the pressure off, and I wanted to embrace being a beginner. And so that's why OG Goes Gourmet was born. The Instagram account was specifically so that I could track my progress going from bad to good. And I had to be intentional about posting the bad and posting the fails, because it was, for me, it was almost like therapy. And for everyone, it might not be the same, but for me, I needed a space to just track growth and to be a beginner and to let myself be a beginner. And that's one of the things that I want to say here. Like, we're looking for a hobby, guys. This is supposed to be fun. We're looking to make ourselves feel better by being better, and by being better as beginners. And or you might be like super advanced. You might find something that you're just really good at. But just remember to take the pressure off whatever you decide to do. You don't have to be perfect at it, and you can choose whatever you want to do. But say, you can't go back to what you're interested in childhood, or your childhood interests are just not who you are anymore. What content are you looking at online? That's the second place that I would go. When you're scrolling, what's sparking joy in you? What is making you think more? What is making you feel interested? I would look at those things. Is it someone surfing? Is it someone swimming? Are there things that the people that you follow do that you really enjoy, and can you do them too? Nobody said you can't steal a hobby. Like, another hobby that I took was from my mom. She was really into gardening. I picked that up too. So what are they doing online that really compels you? And now if you find that you're scrolling online and it's just information that's not like beneficial in any way, and you'll know if it's beneficial. Honestly, be honest with yourself. Like, in that case, maybe you need to do an overhaul of the content that you're looking for, or the content that you're looking at. I think that social media is here to stay. And if you are going cold turkey, that's great. Personally, I'm not, or at least not right now. And so for me, it was trying to make sure to find a way to use content in my life. Like, if I'm going to be watching this, then this has to be something that I can learn from. This has to be something that will make me better in some type of way. If you don't have any of that, I think it's also a pretty exciting time, because that means you have a world of discovery in front of you. And because, like we said, none of this stuff has to be things that you're particularly good at. You get to go out and try a whole bunch of different things and discover what sparks joy in you. These things don't have to be expensive. You don't have to go and pick up the most expensive hobby. Sometimes I will go online and I will look for adult coloring pages, and I will print them out and I will color. Like, that's how simple it can be. The whole point here is to just separate ourselves from the phone a little bit, because what I also found was, by allowing myself to rediscover my interests. Remember earlier when I said, hey, this isn't necessarily about making $1 million. You might find yourself discovering passions that can lead you into doing something else, or rediscovering your focus. I just think it's really important for us to kind of reclaim some of the time and reclaim some of the actions that social media has taken from us. Now, we're talking about hobbies. If you do decide, like me, to post your growth or your journey online, you might find that you have a lot of well-meaning friends and family who have opinions on how you should go about that hobby, and you might need to like draw boundaries, or you might need to be steadfast in what this looks like for you. We're discovering your hobbies, but remember that question I asked myself: what is the story of my 20s? What does my 20s look like for you? You need to make sure that this is the story that you want to write for yourself. So with the cooking, it didn't take too long for people to start telling me to sell plates, or to cater private dinners, or to, do other stuff with the cooking. And it just didn't feel right. That's not what I wanted to do. And also, I specifically did this because I needed a hobby. I needed to do something for fun. And I wasn't in a space that I was going to monetize that yet. Like, I also wasn't that good, at least not my level of standards. Like, I was really just in a learning phase, and they're well-meaning, and they're asking you, that people might reach out to you and ask you to do stuff if they see that you've gotten good at something, because they want to support you. But remember, like, you don't have to do things in the way that other people are recommending. It took a while for me to discover what exactly I wanted to do with this food thing, but allowing myself to have a slow journey with it has led to me now throwing dinner parties for my friends this year, and knowing that I'm gonna, last year, wow. And knowing that I'm going to do some more this year, it led to me starting this channel so that I could share the tips and tricks that I'm learning with you guys. So allow yourself to have your own journey. So we've discovered that we had a problem. We've discovered what the problem is or what's stemming from it. And now we've looked at two different ways to fix that because we're looking for a hobby. The whole point of this is to look for a hobby. Looking at what you're into as a child, and then looking at the content that you consume now. And if the content that you consume now is not feeding you in any way, maybe think about, introducing something new. If you've finally decided to discover a hobby, another thing that I would recommend is to see how you can bring community into it. For me, with the learning how to cook better, I've now been able to bring my friends into it by throwing dinner parties for them sometimes. And if we're throwing a potluck or doing something like that, I'm able to cook for them and do that. And I just think it's important to maintain the connection that we used to have with real life and to try and intentionally build that back into our lives. I was obviously not an adult in the early 90s or 2000s and stuff. So I'm not saying this is what life used to be like. But I was old enough to know that we used to have so much more community and connection. And ultimately, discovering your hobbies is also a really good gateway to introducing yourself to connecting with people around you. That looks like joining a book club, joining a movie club. With the gardening, I quickly found my local gardening center also hosts meetings, and they sometimes will bring in speakers to talk about different plans. And so I went to a couple of those and just see how you can get yourself involved in the community again. The one thing that I will say is that it's work. And I know that sounds kind of scary, but being part of community is work. And sometimes that's not hard work, but it's a lot less comfortable than scrolling on your phone. And I just wanted to point that out because I feel like it's important to acknowledge it. Scrolling on your phone is the easy thing to do. The things that I'm recommending might not necessarily be. And so that means on a Saturday morning, if you have to wake up earlier than you normally do and get out of your bed to drive to a meeting for one of your new hobbies, that might be something that you need to do. It would be easier to stay in your bed scrolling, but if you're watching this video, it might not be as fulfilling. At this point, what we're trying to do is to recreate some of the way life used to be. And if you have any tips and tricks that you can think of for yourself, please comment down below so that we can all share this, because this is also a lifelong journey for me. I do still have weeks and days that I'm scrolling and scrolling, and it just feels like the easy thing to do. And it just feels like what I want to do now. Personally, I'm not going cold turkey on social media, so it's going to be a matter of a lifetime of intentionally consuming. I think that's the whole point of this, intentionally consuming. So let's recap just to make sure we're on the same page. We've identified that there's something kind of wrong. We've found the source of the problem. And now we found the solution and things that we need to do to make it better. The next thing that I will talk about is moving forward. I think even if you found your hobby and you found a way to reduce that screen time and you found a way to, lessen the pressure that social media will inadvertently put on you, I think it's also a good idea to probably interrogate your viewing habits moving forward. And that's something that I had to do for myself. For example, when TikTok came around and it became bigger, I never got one. I never got a TikTok account. And my friends will tease me sometimes. And now sometimes I feel like that Facebook mom. I'm looking at all the memes days and days late because they already saw it on social media. And I know that I'm missing out. I know that I'm missing out. I'm not even going to pretend that I'm not. But for me, I never got a TikTok because at that point, it was about 2020 when all the dancing and stuff is taking off. That was around the same time that I was having my revelation that, this social media thing is not what I intended it to be in my life. Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, those things to me became addictive kind of accidentally. Maybe the engineers were like, oh, we could do something with this here. I felt that TikTok was created with that addiction in mind. It was created to keep you scrolling in mind. And personally, if I'm having this issue with the other apps in already, I just knew that it was not the best idea to introduce it to my life because I knew that I would be scrolling more and more and more and more on that. And I could tell myself that, oh, they have all these recipes and they have all this on that. But I knew that for me, I didn't need another social media app. And I especially didn't need that social media app. And so, I see all the jokes late and my friends are all watching things that I don't get to see. But, It is what it is. So, in your life, think about where you can draw new boundaries and what you can maybe abstain from that you don't need to. Another thing that I like to do with the social media that I did leave in my life is to ask myself, if this was 10 years ago, if this was before social media, would I know about this? Would I care about this? And that's something that I like to ask myself if I feel like I'm looking at something that's kind of inflammatory. At this point, we know that these apps will put information in front of you or put things in front of you or boost things with their algorithm that are supposed to get a strong emotional reaction out of you so that you can stay on the app longer and go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. There's all sorts of mental and stuff going on there that there's information out there that you can look more on that. But the way that I balance myself to make sure that I'm not overly getting angry at something is to ask myself, would I care about this or would I know? And sometimes the answer to that is no, and I just keep it scrolling. And that's not to say that, everything was better years and years ago, because I do know and I recognize that these apps have kind of democratized information in a way that we did not have before. And so they have introduced us to new ways of learning and new information about the world that we might not have seen before. And that's great. But sometimes I just don't need to know and I don't care. Like, I don't need to care about this. And I'm just going to keep scrolling. Like, I don't need to know that your whole family is feuding. And I don't need to know that 300 miles away, there's a local politician who did this one thing that's really pissing people off. I don't need to know that. And I wouldn't have known that before. So that's something that I like to keep in mind. I don't think that these apps are necessarily going anywhere anytime soon. They're pretty ingrained in our life. So it's up to us to find a way to be intentional about how we use them and to take control of what we want them to be in our lives. For instance, YouTube, I think, will remain my baby forever. I might drop the rest of them, but like YouTube, especially, I think it's personally great because you can really control the information that you use on here and that you feed into. And it just feels so much healthier and nicer over here. So for instance, the last dinner party that I threw was basically a YouTube theme. I have a bunch of chefs on here that I really enjoy watching. And so the recipes that I made were straight from YouTube and what they were making for Friendsgiving. So, I'm not completely cutting the social media stuff out of my life. I think that it's still useful in some ways. But at the same time, I do think that it's a lifelong journey to making sure that, we're keeping a healthy boundary and we're keeping tethered to reality no matter what. Like I said, content is supposed to feed our lives. It's not supposed to become our whole lives. So I really hope that these tips and tricks have helped you because this is what I did for me. And I just wanted to share in case it helped something else. If you're still here and you're still watching and you thought that this was great, please leave a like so that other people can reach the same information. It really does help me out. Also, I've been doing all this talking about OG Goes Gourmet and the things that I've learned. And I've actually already posted some videos sharing these tips and tricks with you. YouTube thinks that you might like this video. So go ahead and watch that and come on my own journey with me.